Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. My sister and I were both reborn on the day we registered our marriages. She acted without hesitation and stole the rich heir as her husband. My fiancé, my future husband, was now hers. That once-in-a-lifetime fortune was going to her instead. I sneered. She really believed that marrying a wealthy man meant she'd become a glamorous socialite. But in the end, I kept my feet on the ground and won the Best Actress award, leaving behind countless critically acclaimed works. My sister's only notable work was a 10-minute video of her hot dancing at a sleazy nightclub, a gift from her rich husband. After we were reborn, the very first thing my sister did was hide my household registration booklet and ID card. Then she ran to Dad, crying and throwing a fit. Why is it Emma who gets to marry Charles Grant? I could marry him too. The people from the Grant family were sitting right there in the living room, and her voice wasn't exactly quiet. My dad glared at her, clearly afraid they might overhear. You haven't even graduated college. What do you mean marry someone? I'll find you someone better next time. With our family situation, how could we ever find another rich heir like Charles Grant? Tiffany shot me a vicious glare. There's only one chance. This time, it has to be mine. She wasn't wrong. Our family was at most middle class. Under normal circumstances, there was no way we'd have any connection to someone like Charles Grant, a top-tier heir from an elite family. My dad was just an ordinary doctor. A few years ago, by sheer luck, he saved the life of Mr. Grant, the chairman. The man had no sons, and he knew very well that to climb the social ladder, the only way was by marrying a daughter into a higher class. So in return for the favor, my dad thickened his skin and begged the Grant family for this marriage arrangement before the chairman lost interest. In my past life, I was the one who married into the Grant family. To outsiders, I was a poor Cinderella marrying a rich prince. Lucky and respectable. My biological sister, Tiffany, was consumed with jealousy. She tricked me into going to the beach and glared fiercely at my 9-month pregnant belly. We're sisters, so why do you get to marry into wealth and become someone important while I have to live an average ordinary life? The baby in your belly will be born a rich heir, while mine can't even afford a tutoring class. She went insane and tried to push me into the ocean. As we struggled, we both fell in. When I opened my eyes, we were back in time, reborn. And Tiffany was clinging to this second chance, determined to marry the man who used to be my husband, Charles Grant. She was desperate to grab onto the high branches of the Grant family and become a rich man's wife. But I just stood by coldly. No one on the outside had any idea how much of a living hell it was to be married to Charles Grant. Just as Tiffany was making a scene, a tall, handsome man appeared at the door. My dad instantly put on a flattering smile and rushed to greet him. My whole body broke into goosebumps. Everything I had suffered in that marriage made my body react instinctively to Charles Grant, like a cat bristling in fear. Seeing him again sent every nerve on edge. Tiffany, on the other hand, rushed forward like a hungry wolf spotting fresh meat. Mr. Grant, since you're getting married anyway, maybe consider me instead. I'm younger than my sister. I'm more obedient. I'll listen to you better. Charles lowered his gaze and gave her a glance. She looked so delicate and pitiful. Any man would feel sympathy just looking at her, but then his eyes suddenly landed on me. My body stiffened. I must have looked pale and lifeless, far from attractive. It's just a marriage alliance. Doesn't matter who I marry, he said, pulling his gaze away. Then he lifted Tiffany's chin and stared at her face as if inspecting a product. After a long pause, he nodded. Bring your documents. We'll register the marriage today. Tiffany was overjoyed. She ran back to the study to grab her ID and household booklet. As she passed by me, she gave me a smug smile. My dear sister, your husband is mine now. This insane fortune from the Grant family. It's finally my turn. The very next day, news that Charles Grant, the heir of the Grant family, had gotten married shot to the top of social media trends. Tiffany also used this powerful marriage to catapult herself into the public spotlight. Overnight, she signed on as the female lead in several major dramas. I was all too familiar with this process. In my past life, after marrying into the Grant family, I too was elevated from a supporting actress to an A-list celebrity. But it wasn't because the Grants wanted to help my career. No, the daughter-in-law of the Grant family had to maintain a respectable image in the entertainment world. Only that way could the Grant Corporation's stock stay stable. Publicly, I was Charles Grant's wife, the face of the Grant Corporation. But behind the scenes, I was nothing more than a toy to them. It was only after I married him that I realized just how extravagant and cruel high society truly was, far beyond anything I could have ever imagined. On our wedding night, Charles Grant shoved me onto the stage of a sleazy gentleman's club, surrounded by a bunch of rich heirs. He stood in the audience, shouting at me in my wedding dress, "Take it off, strip." Disgusted, I shut my eyes tightly. My hand instinctively moved to my flat belly. How ridiculous. In my previous life, I was 9 months pregnant and still couldn't be sure who the father of my child was. Was it the son of the John family? That corporate CEO? Or maybe that beast in actor's clothing, the so-called movie king? There had been too many men. I was nothing more than a commodity openly priced on the Gu family's business market. After every business deal, their partners would always throw in the same request. "Why don't you have your starlet wife perform a little dance for us?" I didn't have the right to refuse. From the moment I married into the Grant family, both my father and Tiffany's lives were held tightly in Charles Grant's grasp. My father had traded my life away to climb the social ladder, shamelessly demanding payback for saving the life of Charles's father. But how could a family like the Grants be easy to manipulate? A woman like me, with no powerful family backing, once sold into the Grant family for a high price, was doomed to be torn apart at their whim. I had been terrified that Tiffany would suffer the same fate, which is why I forced her to leave the entertainment industry, and went through so much trouble to find her a decent, honest man. Someone not wealthy, but kind and from a good family. But she had her head in the clouds. She never understood my good intentions. She even tried to kill me and take my place. In this life, I gave her what she wanted far too easily. If she had even the slightest awareness, she would have realized I didn't want to fight her for the right to marry into the Grant family. That place was a hellfire pit. I had to die once to crawl out of it. And yet, Tiffany was so eager to jump in. Just like in my past life, the Grants quickly arranged the wedding. It was held at the Brest Hotel. Tiffany was ecstatic. Early that morning, she posted over a dozen selfies on her social media with the hotel in the background. She probably thought the wedding was glamorous and grand, but to the Grant family, it was nothing more than a formality. Just a word from them and it was done. Anyone with sense would know that if the Grants actually valued this marriage, they wouldn't have rushed the ceremony in under a week. As the bride's sister, I attended the banquet. Halfway through the wedding, both Charles and Tiffany suddenly disappeared. I glanced over and noticed that the table, once filled with Charles's wealthy friends, was now nearly empty. I quickly went to ask one of the hotel staff. Mr. Grant took the bride up to a private room on the 3rd floor, they told me. My heart sank. It was just like the past. I rushed upstairs, pushing past anyone who tried to stop me. As I neared the private suite, music and a familiar scent seeped through the door. For a moment, I felt as if I were back in the middle of that awful club stage. Cheers from the men inside echoed through the hallway. I could even hear the teasing laughter of women mixed in. Tiffany was still my sister, watching her throw herself into the same hell I once lived through. I couldn't just stand by. I shoved the door open. In the center of the dimly lit stage, washed in purplish light, a woman was dancing. But it wasn't Tiffany. It was Charles's ex-girlfriend, Cindy Lynn. "What are you stalling for? Take it all off." That shrill voice came from Tiffany. She sat alone in the audience wearing her wedding dress, the only female among a room full of men. But she was the loudest, her voice sharper and more provocative than all of theirs. The gleam in her eyes was more dangerous than any man there. I suddenly remembered Cindy Lynn had been Tiffany's college roommate. I recalled Tiffany telling me many times how jealous she was of Cindy, the rich girl from an elite family. But last year, the Lynn family went bankrupt. Cindy became Charles's ex. Tiffany's excitement now made sense. This was her moment to finally stomp down the very woman she had once envied and admired, all thanks to Charles's power. I yanked off my coat and ran onto the stage, wrapping Cindy's nearly bare body in it. Startled and embarrassed, she clung tightly to the coat the moment I placed it over her. She looked at me, eyes filled with gratitude. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her off the stage. The men in the audience grumbled in protest. I didn't care who they were, how powerful or prestigious. I didn't care. I just wanted to save Cindy Lynn, just like I had once wanted someone to save me. Someone chased after us. I didn't expect it to be Tiffany. She grabbed Cindy's wrist and snapped at me. She hasn't finished the dance yet. You're ruining everyone's mood. Then she turned to Cindy. Cindy, do you still think you're some rich girl next door? Wake up. If you don't finish that dance, my husband won't let you off. She had so quickly blended into the world of these wealthy men, so quickly placed herself on the same pedestal as Charles Grant. I shielded Cindy behind me. I glared at Tiffany and snapped. Are you insane? Do you even know what kind of place this club is? You made your college classmate dance here. She crossed her arms, chin up. So what? I'm a girl too and I like watching it. What's the problem? I warned her sternly. Tonight, you helped those men force Cindy Lynn onto that stage. Tomorrow you could be the next Cindy Lynn. But Tiffany only smiled with smug sweetness. No way. I'm Charles Grant's lawfully wedded wife. He'd never make me dance like that. I gave a cold laugh. In my last life, I was 3 months pregnant and still got forced up on that stage. Where do you get your confidence from? What makes you think Charles Grant sees you as anything more than an object? Before we could argue further, Charles walked over, several men following behind him. CEOs of major public companies, and even that beloved A-list actor from Aegis Media. All of them were Charles's close friends. No matter what kind of public image they had, tonight they were all seated guests at this perverse performance. I would never forget the humiliation and pain these men brought me in my previous life. The trauma had me breaking out in a cold sweat. Cindy must have sensed something. Her warm hand gripped mine tightly, grounding me. Suddenly, I snapped out of the shadows of my past and turned to Charles. Humiliating your ex-girlfriend on the first day of your marriage. This is the so-called class of the Grant family. Charles looked at me and surprisingly tried to explain. This was your sister's idea. I turned to Tiffany, and in that moment I understood. No wonder it hadn't been her dancing tonight. She had come into this life with memories of the last, just like me. She probably remembered how Charles and his friends loved their games. So she lured Cindy Lynn here, all to please her rich new husband. She didn't care what she had to become as long as she could squeeze her way into Charles Grant's inner circle. Backed by those men, Tiffany warned me coldly. If you take Cindy Lynn away tonight, you'll be making enemies with all of high society. She had slipped into the role of a trophy wife in record time, already eager to stomp on me with her new high and mighty status. Thinking she'd done something impressive, she tilted her head slightly, waiting for Charles to praise her. Instead, he grabbed her by the chin, scrutinizing her face. You've only been part of this family for a few hours. You haven't even made it to the wedding bed yet, and you're already acting like you run the place. Tiffany blinked innocently. Honey, we're married. There shouldn't be any divide between us, right? Charles gave a cold smile. No divide. Suddenly, his face turned icy, and he slapped her hard across the face. Know your place. You really thought you were Mrs. Grant. That slap brought the whole show to a crashing halt. I took Cindy Lynn with me and called a cab to take her home. Before she got in, she looked back at me with gratitude in her eyes. I'll find a way to repay you for what you did tonight. I stood there watching as the car drove off from the hotel grounds, letting out a long breath. Saving Cindy tonight felt like saving the me who was once forced up on that same stage. When I returned to the hotel lobby, the banquet had already ended. The guests were gone. Tiffany stood there with makeup clearly reapplied to cover the swelling on the side of her face. She grabbed my wrist. You've been flirting with Charles behind my back, haven't you? Why else would he hit me for you? She looked furious. I was the one who got there first this time. Why is he treating me like this? Charles's attitude toward me had surprised me too. But I wasn't foolish enough to think he had feelings for me. I stared at her coldly. Weren't you the one who said you could handle the power and wealth of the Grant family? What? Getting nervous already? Tiffany glared at me in outrage. That was when our parents arrived, trying to sound casual but clearly fishing for something. "Sweetie," my dad said, "now that you've married into a wealthy family, living like a queen, maybe it's time you helped out the people who raised you. We can't keep living in that old apartment complex forever." The Grant family's mansion was within a gated estate more lavish than a palace. After visiting once, my parents had no intention of leaving. They were clearly hoping to latch on to Tiffany's marriage and move in. Tiffany put on a proud face. "If you want to live in the Grant estate, I'll talk to my husband, no problem." She was clinging to her dignity, trying to make our parents believe Charles truly cared about her. Then she added, "But I have one condition. You have to cut ties with Emma." She really thought this was some kind of lethal threat. But I almost laughed out loud. Cut ties with those parents. That was the one thing I wanted most. In my last life, they had dressed up their greed as loyalty and gratitude, forcing me to marry into the elite and ruining my marriage and my life. After I married into the Grant family, my parents and Tiffany couldn't wait to demand I bring them into the mansion too. But I didn't want them living under someone else's roof. So I used all my savings to buy 3 separate apartments in the city center, one each for my parents and my sister, but they turned their noses up at them. "They're not even villas," they complained. They accused me of hoarding money and not letting them spend it. Tiffany even spread rumors that after marrying into the Grant family, I ignored my family and was an ungrateful traitor. So this time I'd let them experience firsthand what it felt like to live under someone else's mercy in the Grant household. My mom hesitated. Clearly, she'd already made her decision, just too embarrassed to say it out loud. I gave a cold chuckle. "Fine. You want to cut ties? Let's cut ties. But I bought that apartment. I'm taking it back." "Who cares about that crappy apartment?" Tiffany snapped. "It wouldn't even sell for more than $2 million. My monthly allowance from the Grant family is more than that." She was acting like Charles Grant adored her, and our parents believed every word. They dropped me in an instant, cutting me off on the spot. What they didn't realize was that without that apartment, if the Grant family ever kicked them out, they'd be truly homeless. Tiffany thought she had won it all. She looked at me like a victor, lording over the defeated. "Last time I begged you to let me move into the Grant house with you, and you acted all high and mighty. This time, you are going to be the one stuck on the outside, looking up at me, living the good life. You'll be jealous. You'll grit your teeth, and you'll be helpless." Not long after, I returned to the production set of Whispers at Dusk, only to be told by the director that Tiffany had replaced me as the female lead. I was downgraded to the second female role. Since one of the show's investors was Grant Corp., it didn't surprise me that the newly minted Mrs. Grant was handed the lead. What I didn't expect was that Sue, the actress playing the third female lead, noticed the tension between Tiffany and me and went straight to her behind my back. I didn't know what she said, but the next day she was bumped up to second female lead, and I was demoted again, all the way down to a background extra. My only scene was playing a maid, washing the lead actress's feet. "Either play my foot washing maid," Tiffany sneered, "or get ready to be blacklisted." She stared at me triumphant. "In our last life, you forced me out of showbiz while you strutted around as the star. This time, I want you to suffer the same mediocrity, to feel the pain of being forgotten." I looked at her with cold indifference. Back then, I'd forced her to quit because she was constantly trying to leech off the Grant family's power, dreaming of becoming a star overnight. She had no idea what it actually cost to trade for resources with a family like the Grants. I hadn't wanted to see her end up on the same sleazy stage I did, becoming another commodity on display. So I pushed her out of the industry. I'd even gone through all the trouble of finding her a stable, kind man with a decent background, someone who could give her a peaceful, happy life. But Tiffany had never been satisfied. She resented her husband for being too content, not ambitious enough. She even cheated on him with a man she believed had potential. In the end, she was lied to, used, broken, and driven completely insane. I exposed her right then. "The reason you're mediocre is because your ambitions are sky high, but your fate is as fragile as tissue paper. That has nothing to do with me." Tiffany's face twisted. She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could speak, I splashed the basin of prop water straight into her face. "Blacklist me? I said with a smirk. I wouldn't want your damn spotlight anyway. Tiffany choked and sputtered, her face soaked. The entire crew scrambled to comfort her. After all, she was Mrs. Grant. No one dared offend her. Sue was the most eager. She rushed over, dabbing Tiffany's face while scolding me viciously. Her words were so nasty, I turned to glance at her. And that's when I noticed a faint red mark on her neck, a shallow laceration scar. The male lead of the show was none other than actor Zeke Shao, a regular at that infamous club. In my last life, his favorite method of play was wrapping a pink chain around a woman's neck and watching her struggle to breathe. It gave him a sick sense of control. My throat tightened. I too had once been Zeke Shao's toy. And back then, Charles Grant had stood by and watched. Could it be that Sue, just to secure a better role, had used Tiffany's connections to get herself into that same club? I was almost certain that's exactly what happened. At first, I wanted to warn her not to go too far, not to throw her life away for a role. But before I could speak, she turned to me with a scornful glare and said, "You should just get lost already. Stop riding your sister's coattails." All right then. If that's how it is, I pulled back the warning that had reached my lips, reminded myself to respect other people's fate, and dropped the whole idea of saving anyone. Let them destroy themselves. Just as I walked off the set, Cindy Lynn showed up. She handed me a small bag. Inside was the coat I'd wrapped around her that night at the club. She hadn't gone back on stage to pick up her own clothes. She had left wearing my coat because she found her own clothes too dirty. But today, Cindy Lynn returned it washed clean, neatly folded. She also handed me a contract. "Emma," she said, "I heard Tiffany's been using her connections to blacklist you across the entire industry. I figured your schedule might be wide open right now. If you're not too proud, I'd like you to take this role. I'm the director and screenwriter." The script even won an award abroad, though it was at a niche festival, so it didn't make any headlines here. I glanced at the title of the script. The Morning Light Knows I Came Back from Death. Like me, Tiffany also seemed to have retained fragments of a godlike perspective from our past lives. We both knew exactly which shows would go viral in the next 3 years, and which roles would win over millions of fans. Tiffany had snatched the lead role in Whispers at Dusk, a show set to become a breakout hit the moment it aired next year. She used the Grant family's influence to grab all the top-tier resources. And me? I was blacklisted, left with nothing. I had no idea what the morning light might bring me, but at that moment, it was the only opportunity one had. "Isn't this a bit too generous?" I asked cautiously. Cindy smiled faintly. "You know the saying, a skinny camel is still bigger than a horse. My family might be bankrupt, but we're not destitute. I majored in film. After graduation, I founded my own production company, Sunrise Pictures. If you're willing, I'd like to be your agent." My former management team had already been poached by Tiffany. I reached out and shook her hand. "Then, let's make a comeback together." Cindy didn't waste any time. Less than 2 weeks later, The Morning Light officially started filming. The shoot was located right next to the set of Tiffany's show. Because the sets were so close, crew gossip often overlapped. One day, the delivery guy casually mentioned that the second female lead on Tiffany's set kept calling in sick. Apparently, her health wasn't doing well. I didn't pay it much mind. I was focused entirely on our own production. But about a month later, sirens from police cars and ambulances tore through the streets. Locals said someone had died at the nearby 5-star hotel. That hotel was the most luxurious in the entire film town, and one of its upper floors belonged to Charles Grant. He had bought it specifically to use as another stage for his underground club. There weren't many high-end entertainment spots in this area, and most celebrities had money to burn and dark appetites to feed. It wasn't hard to imagine how profitable that operation was. It was that same hotel. And that day, she hadn't shown up on set. My stomach sank. I rushed straight to the hotel. But as I passed through a narrow alley, a hand suddenly clamped over my mouth and nose, dragging me into the shadows. My back slammed hard against the wall. Pain flared up, and for a few seconds my vision went black. When things cleared, a rough-faced man was pinning my upper body. I recognized him instantly. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing?" Ethan was the man Tiffany had an affair with in our past life. He pretended to be a rich heir, but was actually a low-level thug from a construction site. Tiffany said you'd be mine eventually, he said. So of course, I came to collect what's mine early. His grip was terrifying. I could barely breathe, let alone fight back. The sky darkened. Somewhere nearby, a police whistle wailed through the streets. But here in the alley, Ethan yanked off my coat. His hand wrapped around my throat so tightly I couldn't even scream. Just as despair overwhelmed me, there was a loud crack. Ethan froze, then crumpled to the ground, groaning and holding his head. Fresh air flooded my lungs. I coughed violently, my whole body trembling in panic and shock, until someone pulled me into their arms. "It's me, Emma. It's me." I looked up through my tears. It was Cindy Lynn. I broke down sobbing. She held me close, gently patting my back. "You're safe now. I've got you." Then she helped me to my feet and, with a fierce glare, hurled the brick she'd used at Ethan's body. She led me out of the alley, one arm firmly around me. The night air rushed past, and only then did I feel like I was truly alive again. Suddenly, I noticed the bracelet on my left wrist was gone. I glanced back at the dim alley but quickly shook the thought away. I wasn't about to risk my life for a piece of jewelry. Not far off, I saw a body being carried out of the five-star hotel. The wind lifted the white sheet covering the corpse, revealing a face and the marks on it. Cindy and I locked eyes. Our pupils shrank at the same time. The dead body was Sanshri. The most horrifying wound on her was the chain mark around her neck. From where we stood, we had a clear view. Behind the hotel, under cover of darkness, a man in a black hoodie and sunglasses slipped into a van. His silhouette and the van's model looked exactly like one man's, Zeke Shao the actor. In our past life, Zeke's favorite game was chains. A cold sweat broke out all over me. Sue had tried to climb the ranks by pleasing Zeke, only to be tortured to death by him. Cindy and I stood there frozen in shock, watching it all unfold. No one noticed Ethan creeping up behind us, head still bleeding and rage in his eyes. Several sharp thuds rang out. By the time Cindy and I turned around, all that remained on the ground was a pool of blood. Still in shock, we didn't dare investigate what had happened. We returned to the film set together, shaken to the core. Later that night, two enforcers with cigarettes hanging from their lips were seen grinding their shoes into Ethan's forehead. Ethan lay on the ground, staring blankly up at the sky until Charles Grant's face came into view, filling half his blurred vision. "Mr. Grant, it's a misunderstanding. Your wife sent me. Tiffany's the one who told me to come." Charles's expression was unreadable. "Which part of her did you touch just now?" Ethan hadn't expected that to be the issue. He stammered. I didn't mean to." "So you touched everything." Charles tilted his head ever so slightly. "Cut him up. Feed him to the fish." Ethan's scream rang out through the alley, but it was quickly muffled. What followed was the dull, sickening sound of a blade tearing through flesh. By the sea, Charles stood silently, watching his men toss the remains into the water. In his hand was a shattered jade bracelet. "Emma, my Emma," he murmured, gently kissing the broken edge of the bangle. Eyes closed, he seemed to savor the sensation like a drug. "This time, I'm not sharing you with anyone." That same night, I stormed over to Tiffany's set. She was shocked to see me standing there unharmed, about to fake surprise and innocence until I walked right up and slapped her across the face. Hard, right in front of the entire crew. Her head snapped to the side. She gritted her teeth. "Emma Grant, you hit me." "That was me being kind," I said coldly. I grabbed her costume collar and leaned in, whispering, "You killed me in our last life. In this one, even if I have to kill you and answer for it, it'll still be justice." Tiffany licked her swollen lips and smiled through the pain. "Looks like Ethan gave you quite the scare. Since we're switching lives, let's go all the way with it. That disgusting man used me in our last life. Now it's your turn to experience what I did. Fair's fair." I stared at her, voice icy. "Did you know she is dead?" Her smugness vanished in an instant. Clearly she hadn't heard. I let go of her collar and shoved her aside. "Figure out how you're going to clean this up." As though the Grant family suppressed the news, it was impossible to keep the death of a lead actress completely under wraps. The production quietly recast the role, which only stirred more attention. In the end, they claimed San had committed suicide due to depression. San had no background. Her only connections were the men watching from the audience at that twisted club, and none of them would care about the fate of one disposable plaything. The situation died down quickly. Tiffany continued flaunting her Mrs. Grant status on set like a queen, adored by everyone. No one seemed to notice how little she resembled the version of me who'd been physically and emotionally destroyed right after my wedding. She wasn't even a little pale or worn out, not a bruise in sight. Was Tiffany really being treated as an exception by Charles Grant? But soon I started noticing oddities. The second female lead in Whispers at Dusk kept changing. At one point, a well-known A-list actress had already signed the contract, but the very next day, a fresh graduate from the Film Academy took her place. Then after just 10 days, that newbie vanished from the set. Eventually, the role landed on a singer who'd recently decided to become an actress. All the frequent casting changes slowed production down drastically. Meanwhile, a year later, The Morning Light premiered in theaters. Though a low-budget indie film, it made a stunning breakout thanks to the script and performances. I won the Golden Laurel Award for Best Actress, and just like that, my acting career began to climb back to the top. As for Tiffany, the shows she filmed that year began airing one by one. The roles that had gone viral in our past life, roles that had once exploded into fame, flopped completely in her hands. They were trashed by critics, called cheap, trashy, and downright awful. But I knew the truth. Those scripts had been good. The characters had real potential. They were just ruined by Tiffany's arrogance, shallow skill, and inflated ego. At the Golden Laurel Awards after-party, I saw the new second female lead of Whispers at Dusk, Heather Schwann. She had always been bold with her fashion choices. But at this formal gala, where everyone else wore elegant backless dresses, she was the only one bundled tightly in an oversized coat. A waiter accidentally bumped into Heather Schwann, causing her coat to slip halfway off. What it revealed on her skin made my pupils contract. If I wasn't mistaken, those were syphilis sores. Flustered, Heather quickly pulled her coat back up, keeping her head down the entire time. She had gone to that underground club to exchange her body and health for a chance at a role in Whispers at Dusk, and ended up with a worthless show nobody cared about. The second female lead was always a gamble, and Heather had lost completely. I picked up a wine glass and immediately noticed something was off with the aroma. Thanks to that awful club, I developed a sharp sense for drug drinks. I knew that scent all too well. Looking up, I saw Tiffany watching me from across the room. The moment our eyes met, she quickly looked away, pretending not to notice me. I turned to Cindy Lynn and whispered, "There's something wrong with this wine. I need your help." The hotel hosting the Golden Laurel Awards Gala had once belonged to the Lynn family. Even after the bankruptcy, they'd never failed to pay their staff, so the hotel's manager still held great respect for Cindy. Soon enough, the drugged glass was discreetly switched and delivered to Tiffany instead. Halfway through the banquet, Tiffany began holding her head and left the venue. At almost the same moment, Zeke Shao, the A-list actor, also started showing signs of being flushed and feverish. So Tiffany's plan tonight was to get me and Zeke into bed together. Too bad for her. I never played fair when others struck first. With help from the hotel manager, Tiffany and Zeke were guided into the same room. An hour later, I called a journalist friend. We staged a very public, very real scandal right in the hotel's presidential suite. Mrs. Grant and actor Zeke Shao, caught in bed after the gala, exploded across media platforms. Zeke's bare back in the photos showed the same syphilitic lesions I'd seen on Heather. Tiffany woke up and realized what had happened. She screamed hysterically as the Grant family's men came to drag her away. Of course, the scandal couldn't be directly tied to the Grants. As she was taken away, I stood to the side, watching the chaos unfold. She lunged at me, grabbing my arm. "It was you. You switched the wine, Emma. That should have been you in that bed." "It was me," I admitted calmly. "I won Best Actress, and now you're losing your mind. You knew Zeke had an STD. You let me sleep with him. You wanted me to catch it and to top it off, make me look like I was the mistress wrecking his marriage. Isn't that right?" Tiffany's face went ghostly pale. I grabbed her chin. "You're still too green to play this game with me. Now you're the mistress." You're the one infected. Oh dear, Tiffany. What's that on your arm? I pointed at a faint rash. It was just a mild reaction to the alcohol, but I leaned into her ear and whispered with mock concern. Is that the rash starting? Is it spreading already? She panicked, rubbing her arms furiously. Let's see if Charles Grant still wants you now that Mrs. Grant has something contagious. Zeke's affair scandal trended immediately. Then came the headlines. Zeke Shao syphilis. Zeke Shao collapsing career. I shook my head as I read the trending posts. These media folks were missing the real story. Time to help them out. That same night, I dropped a new tip. Zeke Zhao's underground club exposed. The club, known among elites as the Velvet Room, had always been one of the Grant family's hidden indulgences. This was the first time it had been exposed to the public. Industry insiders soon spoke out. It wasn't just some nightclub with music and dancing. It was a private stage for the elite. On that stage, it didn't matter if you were an award-winning actress or a billionaire's wife. You were nothing more than a commodity, and the transactions that happened behind the scenes were deep in the gray zone. Zeke cheating on his wife was practically child's play compared to the rest. The scandal snowballed overnight. Even Heather Schwann, who had been caught on camera with those same rashes, was dragged into the headlines. The Grant family managed to protect Tiffany, but Zeke Shao needed a scapegoat, so they pointed fingers at Heather. Calling her the other woman wasn't exactly wrong either. But what they didn't expect was that Heather had a breaking point. She posted a bold tweet. Do you know how many actresses auditioned for the second female lead in Whispers at Dusk? The first one was Emma Grant. The rest all got their roles through that club, dancing, stripping, or sleeping their way in. And me, I was just the one willing to go the farthest. That's why I got the role. By the way, does anyone still remember? If C hadn't been choked to death by Zeke Shao, that second female lead role never would have gone to me. Neither SCU nor I had ever truly stood a chance at getting close to the Velvet Room. So guess who was pulling strings behind the scenes? At the end of her post, Heather Schwann outright tagged Tiffany in it. Heather had been a breakout rookie idol, talented and hardworking. She never needed shortcuts, but she got greedy, took the easy road and paid the price. A ruined reputation, a diseased body, and an irreversible fall from grace. Now she was going to take Tiffany down with her, even if it killed her. Tiffany was on her knees before Charles Grant, begging for forgiveness while scratching nervously at the syphilitic sores on her arms. She reached out to grab his hand, but Charles recoiled in disgust and kicked her away. If you hadn't drugged Emma's drink, he said coldly, he wouldn't have turned the tables on you, and the Grant family wouldn't be in this mess. His voice was sharp, laced with pressure. Tiffany had no idea how to respond. Honey, please don't divorce me, she cried. I'll fix it. I swear I'll fix everything. All right, Charles said calmly, lifting her chin and looking at her tear-streaked face. You want to make it up to me? Then you'll perform at the next Velvet Room show. I want you to prove to the world that our show is nothing but a high-class artistic performance, not the depravity they've accused us of. Do you understand me? Tiffany had seen plenty of Velvet Room shows. She had personally sent more than a few young girls onto that stage. She knew exactly what performing there meant. But I'm your wife, she whispered, staring up at him. I'm your officially married Mrs. Grant. How could you ask me to dance in a place like that? Charles sneered. You really think you're a person? He slapped her hand away. From the start, you were just a loyal, obedient dog in my eyes. You should have performed on the very first night of our wedding to please my friends. Instead, you eagerly volunteered Cindy Lynn in your place. I've never seen anyone as shameless and cunning as you. The only reason I kept you around was because you were useful, like a hunting hound. You helped me gather beautiful actresses and serve them up on that stage for our entertainment. That was your only value. But now that everything's out in the open and there's no one else left to throw under the bus, you'll do it yourself. The next time I saw Tiffany, it was on TV. Amid all the scandals, her team had landed her a reality show appearance. The show featured celebrity homes, and Tiffany was introduced as the lady of the Grant estate. Wearing long sleeves, she cheerfully led the camera crew through the mansion, pretending everything was perfect. She smiled brightly, explaining what life was like in a wealthy household, doing her best to convince viewers she was still loved and respected, that her marriage was fine, and that the rumors about her pimping women for her husband were all lies. The show was live, and soon the camera panned to two people in the background, a maid and a security guard. I squinted. The middle-aged woman scrubbing the kitchen floor, dressed like a maid, and the man standing in the scorching sun at the gate were my parents. The very people who had disowned me just to cling to a wealthy marriage. They reached out to Tiffany. She gave them a quick glance of disdain, but couldn't show it in front of the camera. She forced a smile and said, "Oh, those two, they're our housekeeper and security uncle." The moment she said it, I saw the look on my parents' faces change. Embarrassment flooded their expressions, mixed with frustration and quiet rage. They had thought living in a mansion meant living the good life. But now one was a maid, the other a security guard, dependent on someone else, completely humiliated. In my past life, I tried so hard to protect them from this kind of ending. But they never understood. So this time let them taste it for themselves. After the show aired, the public's opinion of Tiffany softened a little. Her fans grew smug online. "Our sweet Tiffany is living the dream life of a rich wife. The rumors are just jealousy. She's Charles Grant's legal wife. Cinderella marrying her Prince Charming. What's not to love? I don't believe Cinderella would be booking girls for her Prince Charming behind closed doors." Someone wrote, "That's obviously a smear campaign started by her sister, Emma." Right on cue, the Grant PR team struck while the iron was hot. They officially announced that Tiffany, Mrs. Grant herself, would personally perform in the upcoming Velvet Room show a month later. Her fans, desperate to keep her image afloat, eagerly supported the narrative. "If the Grants are letting their own daughter-in-law perform," they said, "that proves it's just a classy, artistic dance performance. Nothing shady about it. They're just being edgy." Tiffany's fans said she's defending her right to dress however she wants. If Mrs. Grant can perform at the Velvet Room, why were those other actresses even complaining? Time passed quickly, and soon the day of the show arrived. To my surprise, an invitation from the Grant family was delivered straight to me. Charles Grant personally called. "Best actress," he said. "Don't you want to see your sister dance on stage? I know she hurt you before. This performance, it's my punishment for her." Charles claimed to be doing it for me, as if humiliating Tiffany was some twisted gift. I found him harder and harder to understand in this life. I didn't accept the invitation, but I still saw Tiffany's Velvet Room performance within 10 minutes of the show starting. The video was everywhere online. Watch Tiffany's 10-minute Velvet Room performance free in group chat. Mrs. Grant's wild stage dance full video leaked. VIP footage. Tiffany's scandalous dance. Download now. In the video, Tiffany was wearing the sheer outfit imaginable, moving stiffly to the music. Her limbs lacked grace, and the rhythm didn't help. But what really hit the floor wasn't just her clothes. It was her dignity. That 10-minute performance stripped away every shred of respect she had as an actress and destroyed every illusion she'd built as Mrs. Grant. Cindy Lynn later showed me backstage surveillance footage from the night of the performance. 10 minutes before Tiffany went on stage, she had been holding a printed ultrasound scan. "I'm pregnant, honey. I'm pregnant," she squealed, practically glowing with excitement. She was overjoyed, thinking she was carrying a future heir to the Grant family. In her last life, she had envied me for that. She thought this baby would save her, that she wouldn't have to dance on stage after all. I laughed at how foolish she was. Charles didn't even glance at the ultrasound. He simply grabbed her by the throat and asked, "Is it mine or Zeke Zoe or someone else's?" Tiffany went pale, stunned, speechless. "Even if you're pregnant," he said, "you're still going to dance." Then Charles leaned close and whispered something in her ear. Whatever he said, it made her eyes widen with horror. She stared at him like she was seeing the devil. I couldn't hear what he said in the footage, but Cindy turned to me. "We've collected enough evidence. Now that everyone's watching, let's report them." Over the past 2 years, Cindy and I had quietly gathered solid proof of illegal activity at the Velvet Room, including the suspicious circumstances surrounding C's death, corroborating statements from Heather Schwann, and testimony from other girls Tiffany had recruited. Thanks to my memories from the past, I also knew the dark underbelly of Grant Corp's internal operations. But even with all that, bringing down a top-tier family like the Grants wasn't easy. especially not when the regular patrons of the Velvet Room were powerful heirs from other elite families. Their interests were aligned. Taking them on directly was suicide. So I had laid a trap. After earning my Best Actress award, I purposely provoked Tiffany, exploiting her impulsive nature and pushing her into a corner. I'd already expected her to drug me. Getting her and Zeke into bed had been part of the plan. I wanted all the dirt out in the open. Let public opinion do the heavy lifting. Once the world was watching, we'd strike with the police. Only by dragging every rotten deal into the spotlight could we hit Charles Grant and his circle of predators where it truly hurt. With overwhelming evidence, the police quickly targeted the Grant family. And the deeper they investigated, the more they uncovered. The Velvet Room had claimed more than just Sony's life. Charles shoved Tiffany forward as a scapegoat. She collapsed in a panic and lost the baby. Their public argument at the Grant estate was caught by reporters. The headline the next day cut like a knife. Star of the Velvet Room rejected by husband, taken by police in connection to death investigation. Tiffany, once seen as someone who had made it, once hailed as Mrs. Grant, now had a new title. Lead dancer of the Velvet Room. Soon, the regular patrons of the Velvet Room were arrested and investigated one by one. They were all sons of the wealthiest, most powerful families in the country. The scandal shook the entire elite class. A reshuffling began among the ruling families. The success of the Morning Light had already brought Cindy and me tremendous returns. Cindy used her profits to revive the Lynn family business just in time, and I threw myself wholeheartedly into my acting career. Bit by bit, I began rebuilding the life that had been shattered in my previous one. By the end of the year, I was once again nominated for Best Actress. But on the way to the award ceremony, our car suddenly changed direction. There was a loud bang. Everything went black. When I regained consciousness, all I could see was the endless stretch of ocean. The salty sea air hit my face. The yacht was gliding smoothly across the waves. When I woke up, Charles Grant was standing right in front of me. My skin instantly broke out in goosebumps. "What did you do to me?" I asked, my voice shaking. He was supposed to be under police control. So, how did he manage to kidnap me and bring me out to sea? "Emma," he said calmly. "Thanks to you, every police station in the country has me on their most wanted list. Luckily, I still had some assets overseas. But how does a wanted man leave the country? My friends in jail or bankrupt, all too busy saving themselves. So I bought a yacht and smuggled myself out. The Grant family has crumbled. I have nothing left, but I'm not giving up." He reached out, gently stroking my face. "That's why I'm taking you with me. We're already in international waters. In one more day, we'll reach the S country." He looked at me with eyes full of false tenderness. "They say one day of marriage is worth 100 days of love. We were married for over 900 days in our past life. Don't you feel anything?" I trembled. "What are you talking about?" He smiled. "You really were ruthless with me, weren't you, Emma? Don't play innocent in front of me. Tiffany told me you remember everything from your past life too." My eyes widened. I stared at him, stunned. So it wasn't just Tiffany and me. Charles Grant had also been reborn. Suddenly, I understood what he had whispered in Tiffany's ear that night. He had said to her, "Your sister was 3 months pregnant and still danced for me. If she could, why can't you?" That was the moment Tiffany realized he remembered, too. That was why she had looked so terrified. After experiencing the brutal reality of the Grant family firsthand, she finally understood what kind of monster Charles truly was. "Emma," Charles sighed, his tone full of misplaced affection. "After you and the baby died falling into the sea, I finally realized how much I loved you. People only know what they had after it's gone. That's why I didn't force you to marry me this time. I knew eventually you'd be mine again. I was patient, but your sister, she practically threw herself at me. She killed you in our last life, so I let you punish her. She's smart, I'll admit that. Keeps throwing other women under the bus to save herself. But I don't like that kind of cunning. It's not attractive." He gently smoothed out the hair the sea breeze had blown loose around my face. "I like you better. Kind, resilient. No matter how many times life crushed you, you never turned ugly inside. Even a monster like me was drawn to you." Then he pulled me into his arms. I want to go to a new country with you. Start a new life together. I was too generous in the past. I let too many people near you. But this time, I want you all to myself. I won't share you with anyone. He called what he did to me last time generosity. The abuse, the humiliation, the destruction. He dismissed it all as being too generous. He never thought I'd fight back. He thought I was still the soft, obedient Emma from our past life. You said we're in international waters? I asked softly, resting my head on his shoulder. Then slowly, I reached for the silver hairpin holding my hair in place. Before the awards ceremony, I had styled my hair in an elegant updo. Cindy Lynn had insisted on pinning it with a silver ornament, saying she wanted me to walk the red carpet at my most beautiful to claim my second Best Actress trophy. That second trophy would now be paid for in blood. I gripped the hairpin tightly and drove it into the softest part where his neck met the base of his skull without hesitation. Charles froze. Then he began to struggle, but I kept pushing, forcing the entire pin deep into the nerve cluster at the back of his neck. It was a vital point. His body went limp. He stared at me in shock, unable to speak. With my blood-soaked right hand, I grabbed his collar and shoved him back, pressing him against the edge of the yacht. International waters, I whispered, voice calm and light, like a sea spirit whispering into the wind. The ocean will erase everything. I sat there for the rest of the night, alone in the middle of nowhere. When morning came, a patrol boat flying a national flag approached. Cindy Lynn rushed onto the deck the moment she arrived, throwing her arms around me. You scared me to death, she cried. I thought you were gone forever. I thought you'd fallen overboard. I smiled and patted her back. In my last life, the sea had swallowed the pieces of my broken soul. This time I had used it to avenge myself, and I was going to live. As I looked over the spot where Charles Grant's body had disappeared into the water, I thought, let those monsters watch from the depths as I rebuild the brilliant life they tried to destroy. Later, the Coast Guard asked me about Charles Grant's whereabouts. He kidnapped me. I told them. When I tried to fight back, he fell into the sea. And then suddenly a shark jumped out and ate him. Really? That's exactly what happened, I added, acting terrified. I was so scared, I lied. Later, Cindy Lynn said it was the worst acting she'd ever seen from me. But regardless, Charles Grant had kidnapped me. Anything I did was justified self-defense. He was dead, and no one was going to waste time investigating the death of a disgraced bankrupt heir. When Tiffany found out Charles had died in international waters, she was already scheming to inherit whatever assets he had overseas. But she soon discovered that all she inherited was his massive debt. Charles had planned to divorce her. She clung to the marriage for the Grant fortune and refused to let go. Now, with billions in debt hanging over her, no amount of regret could help her. She was neck-deep in legal trouble, implicated in multiple deaths, and had nowhere left to turn. Eventually, my parents showed up, dragging Tiffany with them, begging me to take her in. The syphilis scars on her body had spread all the way up to her neck. She couldn't hide them anymore. Even my parents looked disgusted, avoiding any physical contact with her. Oh, didn't you once turn your noses up at the house I bought you? I asked with a cold smile. Now what? Regret it? My parents couldn't even meet my eyes. They stood there with their heads bowed, ashamed. Let's make another choice then, I said. Between Tiffany and me, you can only pick one. I pick you, Emma, they said in unison without hesitation. You're our best daughter. I scoffed. But didn't we already cut ties years ago? They froze stunned. I called security and had them escorted out. They wept and cried that they couldn't survive like this anymore. I smiled. One of you is a housekeeper. The other's a guard. You'll find a way to get by. Isn't this the life you wanted when you chose the Grant family? Well, congratulations. You get to live that life forever now. After I sent them away, Tiffany clung to me and cried. Sis, so your past life was that miserable? For a moment, I thought she finally understood the hell I had gone through. But then she burst into laughter. Mad, mocking laughter. So, you were treated worse than a dog by Charles Grant in your past life, she cackled. And I was actually jealous of you? Turns out I was better than you all along. Yes, you were, I said with a soft smile. Which is exactly why I gave you the chance to marry him after we were reborn. Didn't you notice? I never once tried to compete with you for him. Tiffany's expression froze. I turned and pointed toward the villa across the street. The man who moved in today lives there. He has a gentle wife and a sweet little daughter. They're a happy family. That man, he was the wealthy young heir I had originally chosen for Tiffany in our past life. A hidden gem. If she had just stayed by his side and lived simply, she would have been a wealthy, stable housewife by now, far happier than I ever was after marrying into the Grant family. Sis, I once planned the perfect life for you, I said. But you destroyed it yourself. Tiffany turned and stared at the man in the villa across the street. In a sudden panic, she ran toward him and threw her arms around him. Baby, it's me. I'm your wife. He shoved her off him without hesitation and shouted, Get away from me. Come any closer and I'll call the cops. I could hear Tiffany's sobs unravel into something unhinged. A passerby caught it on video, whispering, Isn't that the woman who did the crazy strip dance in the cabaret show? The so-called society lady. She's completely lost it. Eventually, Tiffany was arrested for her role in the crimes that resulted in multiple deaths. She was sentenced to life in prison. 5 years later, I held my 7th Best Actress award. By then, when people talked about Emma Ye, they called me the queen of the billion-dollar box office. Every movie I starred in was a guaranteed hit. And always, there was someone who brought up Tiffany's name. Who's that again? Someone would ask. Oh, another would say. She was the lead in that scandalous strip show, The Crazy One. Oh right. I remember now. I still have her infamous 10-minute dance video. Want a copy? As I stood beneath the golden spotlight, the weight of my 7th Best Actress trophy firm in my hands, I smiled. Not the rehearsed kind, but the kind that came from a heart finally free. The applause was thunderous, but I no longer needed validation from it. I had rebuilt myself from the ashes, piece by jagged piece, and stood tall, not just as an actress, but as a survivor. In the crowd, I saw familiar faces. Cindy Lynn, who had been my rock through every storm. My loyal team who never gave up on me. Even strangers who once judged me now clapped with admiration. But I didn't look for my parents or Tiffany. They were chapters one had closed. Lessons etched into my bones. I no longer needed revenge. I had won. Not just in fame or fortune, but in dignity. My name no longer came with whispers or rumors. It came with respect. Outside the theater, a breeze drifted in from the ocean. I looked up at the stars, breathing in the freedom I had fought so hard for. My past was buried in those waves. My future stood wide open. And this time, I would write it my way. The curtains had closed on my tragedy,